Building a company is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It's so tough, emotional, painful. The internet is reorganizing around algorithms instead of around people. That's not good. I don't want to build that version of the internet. Patreon is literally the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life.
Running a startup sometimes it's like swallowing glass. Were there ever periods where you thought to yourself, maybe I shouldn't be CEO?
Wow, what a question.
Yeah.
Jack Conte is CEO of Patreon. He co-founded Patreon as a starving artist, desperate to support himself from his music. And now he's trying to save the internet. Today on the Karat podcast, Jack shares why top YouTubers are burning out, how to rebuild a sustainable internet, and how to balance pursuing art with building a billion-dollar business. And if you enjoy the podcast, we're launching a creator newsletter all about stories like these, industry news, and how to improve as a creator. It's free if you sign up in the next 90 days via the link in description below.
Jack, thanks so much for making time today.
Are you kidding me? Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
The first time I actually saw you online was during 2020 and COVID.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Your music helped me get through some of the hardest doldrums of that period.
No
In
way.
particular, I didn't even realize this was Jack Conte, CEO of Patreon. The mashup you did on Pamplemousse, Jamiroquai, and the Bee Gees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was so
Staying
fun.
Alive, Virtual Insanity.
Yes.
It's so catchy, but the reason why I listened to this on repeat in 2020 without knowing it was you, you've got this shot with the five of you playing together.
Yeah.
Your wife is singing, and you are a musical gremlin of energy. You're pounding away at the keys. You have your hoodie with the strings pulled up, and you're wearing glasses. So I didn't connect. Oh, this is Jack. I just remember watching the video for this, because a lot of times I listen to music, I listen to the videos, and I'm like, this guy is so full of energy. I want to capture some of that myself.
You know why? It's because of the way we record and the way Pamplemousse records, because now I have a triple-time job and I work like an absolute dog. And in order to record Pamplemousse, I would go down to LA during that period. I'd go down to LA once a month and I would have one day and we would arrange and record 4 songs in one day.
Wow.
And then I'd fly back up here and I'd start my 70 to 80 hour weeks again. That one day was like this oasis of like creative bursting energy and fun. And I loved those days. I was like unhinged. It was so fun. And then also I would go down and all those people, all those musicians, bass player Nick Campbell, Brian Green, the guitar player, drums Rob Humphreys and Kyle Crane and Ben Rose, like all these people are like my favorite people to hang out with. And so I'd go down there, I get to see my friends for a day, and we get to play music and record music for a day, and it was just the most fun thing ever. So
I especially love, too, everything I hear in that video, I can see being played on screen. It's so authentic.
that's a big piece of it. Now, we started that in like 2008. We actually developed this format called the video song, which had rules. The rules were if you hear it, then at some point you see it. In other words, there's no hidden sounds. And then the second rule was if you see a thing happening in the video, that's the actual take that you're hearing in the audio. Those were the 2 rules. And the idea was when you hear most music, it sort of feels like a magic trick. And you kind of don't know what made that sound. And it kind of feels like these amazing geniuses just like barfing out genius from the clouds on high and you don't know how they made it. And so what we kind of wanted to do is be like, no, like there's home recording gear now and you can have a little $200 audio interface and a laptop and set up a cheap mic and make amazing sounding records. And that set of rules, you kind of see people in their pajama pants, you know, in their bedroom recording stuff, which now in 2023 is kind of like tried and true. Everybody knows that. But no, that wasn't happening in 2008. And so that was like the set of rules that we put in place. And you see real people really in their bedrooms, really making music. And the idea is hopefully it inspires other people to have this feeling of like, yeah, I can do that too. And it has. I mean, those are the comments that we get on Pamplemousse videos, the ones at least that are the most meaningful to me is people feeling like, I should dust off my drum kit and get them out and start playing again.
There's another whole set of comments I've seen on your recent videos from Pamplemousse, Scary Pockets, and your own channel. From the last one you've posted was like, oh my gosh, like almost a decade ago. And it's, what happened to him? Why he stopped making music? And other commenters are like, oh, well, you know, he has a job like running Patreon. And some people coming back and they're like, oh, I wish he'd go back to the music. And so my question is, how many musicians have made the transition to tech CEO? What inspired you? Clearly the music feeds you. You described going down to LA, having this oasis of music and sound. You looked so energized even when you were talking about it. to come back to the day job of running Patreon, where, you know, running a startup, sometimes it's like swallowing glass.
So many thoughts on that. I most certainly have not stopped making music. In fact, I'm making more music now than I was even before Patreon existed. You know, Scary Pockets for 7 years was putting out 52 music videos a year. Pamplemousse was doing the same. So I was making 100 music videos a year for the last 7 years. So like I have been way more prolific during the Patreon period than actually pre-Patreon, where I could only make, you know, one video, you know, every month or two. It was sort of the pace that I could go at. So I'm one of those creators that's like, I have like 20 different channels, and kind of whatever I'm feeling in that particular year or whatever works with my life, you know, that's the sort of creation that I focus on and spend time on. And so like right now, for example, Pamplemousse is coming out with originals. Scary Pockets has sort of stopped our weekly output. And I'm spending a lot of my time, you know, on my Instagram channel, just sort of talking about my thoughts on the creator economy and the music industry and, you know, what the web looks like for creators moving forward and sort of that sort of stuff. But what's it like to come back to the day job? And you're right, it is swallowing glass. It is hard. Building a company is, can we swear on the podcast?
Absolutely. Yes.
Fucking hard. Building a company is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It's so tough and emotional and painful. And so then I think the natural question is like, why would you do that? You know why. And, you know, I think there's going to be some portion of people who probably feel like this is a trite answer. It's just the freaking truth, which is that I literally go to bed at night thinking about being able to send money to people who make amazing things. I know what that feels like, to be making stuff and putting it on the internet and feeling like I'm building community. I'm making things that resonate with people. I'm telling stories that are moving people in their hearts, and people feel seen even and connected because of the things I'm making. And then I recognize the importance of being able to build a business around that, the importance of being able to do that in a sustainable way. What can I say? That's really fucking important to me. I care about that a lot. And I can't not do that. And as you know, it's so weird. My whole 20s, I grew up being one of those kids and one of those musicians that was like, I am not going to be one of those musicians that becomes a business person in their 30s. That is not me. I'm not going to do that. And the odd thing is, Patreon is literally the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. It is so rewarding to be able to help creative people kind of turn their dreams into actual things in the world. And so that's why you swallow glass.
The trend of history, starting from starving artists, has seemed to progressively make it even harder for artists to make money, moving from paid works of arts to downloads to streaming. Now you're just a piece of content slotted into the algorithm. It seems like as technology moves more and more, it gets even harder for the original creator artist to make a living. And you're almost starting this countercultural movement where you're like, no, this is how you make money. This is where you build community.
Hi there. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to hear more creator stories like these, or you're a creator looking to level up and improve, or you just want to track everything happening in the news that affects you, like is TikTok being banned or not, I'm launching a newsletter that's all about creators and free for the next 90 days if you sign up via link below. Now back to the podcast.
It seems like as technology moves more and more, it gets even harder for the original creator artist to make a living. And you're almost starting this countercultural movement where you're like, no, this is how you make money. This is where you build community.
The web has changed so much in the last 20 years. I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, because I think we're at a pivotal moment on the internet. You know, in particular, when things started working in the 90s, you know, which wasn't that long ago, right? Like when the internet first started hitting the mainstream media and press, and people started logging on, you know, I remember that. Like I was a teenager and I was watching it on TV and learning about email and starting to use the web. And it was this read-only version of the internet, right? It was like AOL, and you could consume and you could download media and you could, read news, and it was a read-only version of the web, right? In retrospect, people call that Web 1. And the beautiful thing about Web 2, which emerged sort of in the early 2000s with YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all those companies, we take that for granted now because we're used to it. But the beautiful thing about that was, for the first time emerging out of the 90s, the internet wasn't just read-only anymore. It was, you could upload to the internet, you could share to the internet, you could publish, you could tweet, you could talk. I still think that's incredible. I still think that's beautiful. I think it's really valuable. Now, I'm not saying there haven't been bumps in the road along the way, but like that in and of itself is this really wonderful thing. I think the problem is maybe the most beautiful thing about that transition into Web 2 was this concept of the follow, right? Which is like not like a feature. I don't think of the follow as like a feature. The follow is a piece of internet architecture that is like foundational to a free internet that is functional for creators. Like the creator organized community based on the concept of the follow is like a deeply beautiful, important, functional piece of the web. And I think that the hard thing and the tough thing for creators, you know, is that over the 2010s into 2020, I think we're starting to see the web shifting in its prioritization of the follow, in the way the whole internet is organized. Specifically, you know, at the end of the 2010s, as TikTok emerged, we started to see a complete abandonment of the concept of the follow, right? Building a community on TikTok is, I don't want to say impossible, but like you said it, the nugget on TikTok is the short form video, not the person. The atomic unit of TikTok is the video, the 30-second clip, not the human. And more of the web is now starting to imitate TikTok, and the web is starting to be organized around interests and algorithmic curation instead of around people and communities and the follow. And so I think what we're seeing is that beautiful piece of architecture fading into the background in terms of prioritization as this next phase of the web emerges. And, you know, everybody talked about Web 3 as being crypto. I actually think Web 3 it turns out is not crypto. If Web 2 is sort of the birth of the follower and the publishing and sharing mechanisms, I'm worried that Web 3 is starting to look like actually the shifting of the internet away from follow architecture, away from creator-led communities, and toward algorithmic curation and this sort of content treadmill version of the web, which I don't think is good for creative people, and it's like absolutely top of mind for me right now.
In 2020, I felt there's almost like a creative heyday. There's a moment where, Jack, you've spoken a lot about the second creative renaissance, where there's this overflowing of knowledge because everyone's able to create and share. And in 2020, there's a period of time I was like, oh, I'm seeing this. Everyone's going and making content. But over the past couple of years, I've seen that change. We're sitting almost at the intersection of three different trends. As you just said, algorithmic content is now taking over. You're not even a creator to follow. You're just a piece of media, number one. Number two, top YouTubers are just quitting. Ones who've built real followings and can support themselves are saying, I can't do this anymore. And number three, media organizations, legacy creators are shutting down. Pitchfork, Sports Illustrated, the LA Times, they're all laying folks off, saying this business model isn't working. So it feels like with this golden moment, and now it's like it's all falling apart.
I have a different way of thinking about it. And I'm not saying that none of those things are true, but I think those are like local minima is how I would describe it. And I think there are some longer trends that have been the way they are, like the accelerating trends for decades, actually centuries in some cases, that are holding true now, and they give me a lot of hope for the future. Look, there's going to be a lot of people, I think, who are, you know, who see this, have a more pessimistic attitude, or just even think it's more of a realistic attitude. So the disclaimer here is I'm an optimist, right? Like, I think we're going to make it. I believe in us. I believe in creators. I believe in creative freedom. I believe in creative control. I believe that the internet will work its way through this phase and will come out the other end stronger and better for creative people. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be waking up every day and fighting like I'm fighting. Where that belief comes from for me is really kind of the intersection of three trends. I think creation tools are becoming more ubiquitous and more affordable than they've ever been. And that is a centuries-long trend. Like starting in the, with the Industrial Revolution, people figured out how to mass manufacture pianos. You get pianos into millions of living rooms of people. You get an explosion of genres, blues, ragtime, jazz, folk music. That trend continues through the 1900s, and you get, recording tools and recording media and the birth of vinyl and phonographs and CDs. Maybe it cost $250,000 to make a record back then, but then you get into the 80s and 90s and you get digitization of music, and you get laptop recording software and these microphones that we're using right now. And the point is, creation tools are becoming more affordable and more ubiquitous than they've ever been. Now you can make a record in your bedroom for $400, and it can get more streams than a major label that spends $1 million on a record. Mm-hmm. That is like a trend that is literally hundreds of years old and accelerating right now. It's still accelerating. The explosion of tools available to creative people is unlike it's ever been before. I think the newest wave of that, of course, is even like generative specialized AI tools, right? That help you edit faster, those sorts of things. There's a second trend, though, that I think is really exciting, which is the connectivity of people. Another very old trend that is only accelerating. People are more connected now than they've ever been before. It's easy to forget what it was like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but it was not like this. Now, I think there's a lot of downsides that come with that connection too. But one of the upsides is that you can distribute your work. There will always be gatekeepers. There will always be like constraints on that distribution. But more people are able to distribute their work now because of connection than ever before in history. And that trend is still accelerating. And then I think the third one is the economics of creativity. Like, it's so easy to forget this. When Patreon started, it was only 11 years ago, there were like 3 companies on the web that would send you a check at the end of the month. It was like Kickstarter. There was a company that was using called Stage It. And then YouTube had just like kicked off its ad share program. That was it. There was like no other way to make money at all. This is only 10 years ago. Now, like, monetization architecture is like table stakes for any company. Like, even like, I mean, every company is built, like it is table stakes to build subscriptions and tips and payments and ad share programs. And like, that's like expected. Even just that cultural transformation over the last decade, from literally the attitude being, hey, you're getting distribution. Why are you complaining about getting paid? Figure that out. Which was the attitude 10 years ago by these sort of mass media companies, the YouTubes and Facebooks and Instagrams of the world, to now where it's like, literally like, how fast can we build new monetization tools to try to help creators make a living so that they stay on our platform, right? Yeah. Like, I'm not saying it's altruistic. I'm just saying culturally, it's like table stakes now. The point is, those 3 trends, those aren't slowing down anytime soon. Those are all speeding up. And that gives me a lot of hope for the future of creativity. Like, I think the end state of those trends is hundreds of millions of people quitting their jobs and becoming full-time professional creators of all different types and forms. I'm not saying just podcasters and episodic media, but all different types of creativity. I think we're gonna see that thriving over the next couple of decades.
So do you see a world where, I think there's 2 related questions here. Everyone can be a creator. And I think the second question is it a good world if everyone is a creator? Like, should that happen normatively?
No, I don't think so. I think some people will want to be creators and some people will not. I think what we're going to start to see is, what is a creator?
Yeah.
And I think what we're starting to see is that definition is starting to get broader and broader, right? Like, I think if you make stuff and you publish it online, in many ways, you could count that as a creator. And then I think if there's just different types of creativity, right? There's going to be visual arts and there's going to be podcasting, but we're starting to see people who you would never thought of as creators become creators. Like, literally, there's a bunch of VCs now who are like, they're like publishers now. And that's been happening for like 5 years now. So, will more and more people start to publish and post and build media streams? And like, absolutely, of course, that's already happening. And I think that's going to keep happening too.
So understanding, hey, the gradual trend is toward goodness. It's easier for people to make stuff, to connect and follow each other, and to make money. Going back to the second trend I mentioned, though, you've found this group of people who seem to have successfully done that, like Tom Scott and Joel Haver and Seth Everman, Matt Pat, but now they've decided to step back. How do you understand this now in the context, like, no, things are generally good, but here's a potential local minima to examine and understand?
There have been so many great takes on this trend right now. I think MKBHD had an amazing video about this that really shed a lot of light on it. I think I loved John Green's video. I think it just came out this morning, where he sort of talked about, if you think of it as just like a television, really good shows have like 4 or 5 seasons and then they stop. That doesn't mean they failed. They can be great shows that had like 4 or 5 seasons and then they stop because the person who created them said what they wanted to say and it finished. I remember when Calvin and Hobbes finished. I was destroyed as a kid. But it's funny because in retrospect, I finished that last Calvin and Hobbes comic, where they're walking away in the snow together. And I'm like, Bill Watterson did it. He said what he wanted to say. and it's whole to me. It's complete. Like those books are endlessly meaningful to me, and they had the impact on my life that I think he was hoping to have on people's lives. And it would not necessarily be better if he were still cranking out. In fact, it might even be worse if like he were still cranking stuff out. So I don't think like production, for infinity is the goal here. That's the first thing. And then maybe the second thing is, which goes back to the MKBHD point, is like, Pamplemousse went through this. My band with my wife went through this. Scary Pockets is going through this. Like we were on the weekly, music video train for like 6 or 7 years. And we've been uploading since 2008, and I've been uploading since 2007. So like I've been doing this for, whatever, how many years is that? Way too many years. And then this new wave of Pamplemousse since 2017, 2018 was weekly music videos. We got to a point where we were just like, that was fun.
Yeah.
Like we're done with that now. And we wanted to focus on making original records and writing original music. And we didn't want to crank out 50 original songs a year. We wanted to focus on making 12 great original songs that we were really proud of. And that's where we are now. And I feel really good about that. It's not weekly uploads, but it is creativity, and it is lighting us up, and it is making us happy. And that's kind of like, I feel great about that. Maybe the last thing I'll say about like the quitting phenomenon here is, I think what we're starting to see also is like this misaligned incentives problem play out to its limit. And what I mean by that is like, I'm a creative person, and I've talked to a lot of creators at this point. Like what I care about is like, I want to make great stuff that I'm really proud of, that deeply reaches into people's hearts and connects with them and makes them feel less lonely, and that expresses myself and puts words to something that was vague and fuzzy before, but it just eloquently sums up a feeling, or like that's what I want, right? I want those things. And then I want people to feel impact and meaning from those things. That's what I want. Now, when I take out my phone and I get little doses of rewards from, YouTube Studio, it's training me to want watch time.
Yeah.
Now, it's not that watch time isn't the things that I just said. It's just not one-to-one, right? There is everything I just said about what I truly want as an artist, and then there is watch time. And we've gotten this, we're in this Pavlovian circle here where we're just getting dripped, dopamine to learn to want watch time, which is what YouTube wants. And the truth is there's a gap between what YouTube wants and what I want as an artist. There's a gap there. And so and YouTube is good at this. They're good at pushing me closer and closer to watch time and optimizing for watch time and getting me to want watch time. And people talk about watch time, and now there's retention editing, and there's all these things that push artists to want watch time. But I actually don't think that's what we want. I don't think we care about watch time. I think we're trained to care about watch time. I think we're seeing that gap play out at scale now. We're seeing that incentive problem start to hit its limit. And because we just realize, okay, actually that's not really what I want as an artist. And maybe some people do, and that's cool too. But it's not one-to-one with what I want, at least.
Yeah, it goes back to, in a capitalistic system, YouTube, to your point on connection and monetization, has done an amazing job, but YouTube makes money by maximizing watch time. And as an artist, you plug into that, suddenly your incentives shift as well. It reminds me, I saw an interview with Rick Rubin, who recently wrote The Creative Act.
I haven't read that yet. Is it good?
It's good.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing he said, it's all controversial. Art cannot be made for the audience. It can only be made for you, because when it's made for the audience, it's not art anymore. It's commerce. I thought about that. He's saying, in a perfect world, in his ideal vision of an artist, you're making something purely based on what you think is good, not what others think is good. Do you agree with that?
I don't. I disagree with Rick on this point. I've heard him talk about that before. I actually think it's beautiful. And the truth is, I wish I was like that. I really do. It sounds great, right? Like
platonic ideal.
Yeah, like I hear that, I'm like I honestly feel like guilty. I'm like, oh, I wish I was that just pure and fucking awesome, and I wish I didn't give a fuck like that. And then like if I really search deep, I do want my art to impact people. Like, if I just make art, like Van Gogh famously made paintings in his basement for 11 years before a single person saw them. Actually, that's not true. His brother saw them. His brother saw his paintings. That was it. For 11 years. And he just kept painting. That's making purely for oneself as opposed to for some expected external reward. It's making intrinsically as opposed to making extrinsically. I think, especially if that's your attitude, there's a that can result in amazing creative output, an incredible creative output. For me, I can't quite get to that level of purity because when I make things, I've noticed that like if somebody else enjoys it, it actually makes me feel really good. Like if I finish a concert and somebody comes up to me and goes like, man, the lyrics in that second verse where you talk about, you know, your friend's pain and their death. And like I had a friend who died in college and they start telling me about this. I feel like the purpose of my life is being manifested in that moment because I feel like I've spoken to another person and connected with another person. And art is so much about that for me. It's about connecting to other people. And I wish I could separate art from audience because it sounds pure and wonderful. And I know something about myself is just that I want to have impact on other humans, and that does matter to me.
You care. You want to see that it was received.
I do.
That's what completes the art for you.
It does. It's important to me. And again, I almost feel guilty about it, but I just need to be honest about it.
I've seen too, previously, well before Patreon, even as a kid, you were spending hours recording VHS tapes. You were making like claymations. You were spending like weeks and months on videos that not a lot of people saw. So even in that earlier Jack phase, was it around, well, someone eventually is going to see it. And even if it's just one or two people, that's what it makes it meaningful. Or was it more like, no, like one day people will see, but for now, this is enough just to get to make this.
Yeah. So I spent 4 years making a 3-minute animation. 4 years between high school and then into my first year of college. YouTube didn't exist. So like, there was no, but I knew I was going to submit it to a local film festival or something. And so it was worth it to me. I also used to make, for my friends' birthdays, I would make cool beatboxing videos that were like, like Michel Gondry-ish, where I would experiment with like practical effects in camera, and I would like turn the lens a certain way and use like little cutouts and animations, and like I'd double click the record button. And then I would package all that up and I would print a DVD for my friend and I'd put a label on it and I'd say happy birthday, and I would give them like a DVD of like something that spelled their name or like some grouping of 3-minute videos that was like a gift for them. And for me, that was like a way to self-express that impacted another person. And so for me, again, like creativity is both for the joy of creation. I love making things. It just lights me up. And I want that creation to
someone watch this,
impact a person.
Okay, wait, Jack, I love that. But can we talk for a minute? Wait, so 4 years. 3 minutes.
Yeah, it was about three and a half minutes, I think. It's called Black Hat White. Yeah.
What was it about?
It was about two neighbors who lived across the street from each other, and it was a story that I heard somewhere. It's a real story. I forgot who wrote this story, and I wish I could give them credit right now, but I'm not going to be able to. But I was so inspired by the story because it was so just meaningful for me. A person walks down the street. Half of their hat is black, and half of their hat is white. And they walk down the street, and these two neighbors see them, and then the neighbors start talking about this strange occurrence of this person walking down the street. And sure enough, they get into an argument about what color the hat was. And, I guess it was just like my high school philosophical freshman English class self getting excited about this idea of perspective and seeing multiple sides of an issue. And I've always been like fascinated by seeing multiple sides of an issue. I like to understand different sides of things because I think it helps you find truth when you like can cross-index across a bunch of different perspectives. Like I just find that fascinating. And so this story of these two people just bickering and fighting and getting so angry at each other and eventually like beating the shit out of each other, which is what happens in the animation. They're like whacking each other and like getting into a fight because they just didn't realize that it was this simple thing where half the hat was that and half the hat was black, half the hat was white and half the hat was black. I loved that story. And I loved it enough to spend 4 years making a 3.5-minute video about it.
I saw this, another COVID era throwback for me was Bo Burnham, where he recorded Inside.
Oh my God.
It's beautiful. One of the songs I have on repeat, he talks about his relationship with the audience as an artist. To your point, how you say, yeah, in a platonic Rick Rubin world, I make this for me. Who cares if anyone else sees it? But in reality, you're like, no, I care. And he talks about the audience. He says, I love you, but I hate you. And I still need you. Look and laugh at the poor artist with steadily declining mental health. And it fits into this narrative where, in some ways, sometimes artists create to give others that which they don't get to express themselves. A feeling of connection and happiness, right? That's why they're creating in the first place, because they don't feel that.
Yes.
Is that something that resonates with you, where it came from a place where I don't have this, I'll give to others, or more from a place of, no, I have this and I want to share?
I think it was Tolstoy. I don't remember who it was. They described art. They defined art as the transference of a feeling that a person once had to another person. Can I give you the feeling that I had? And for me, that's what it is. It's not that I want to give people something I have not experienced. It's kind of the opposite. For me, I have this desire as an artist and a creator to be understood. I want to be seen. Maybe it's the wrong word. Like I don't even know where it comes from. It's weird. I want people to know this complicated thing that I feel. I want to be able to explain it to somebody else. Like that really matters to me for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's just DNA. And art for me is a way to exercise that. It's a way to manifest that feeling. It's a way to explain something to somebody in a way that resonates emotionally that I was unable to communicate in any other way to them. And that's what I love about it.
I love that. For me, similarly, that desire to be seen. Every time I get in an argument with my girlfriend or my co-founder, I always want them like, hey, do you understand me and my story and the 20 plus years of my existence leading up to this moment? And then you can be like, you're dumb and I hate this, but do you get where I'm coming from? Is that was the number one most important thing for me.
I actually love that framework and comparison. Relationships are so hard. And one of the key things I've learned about it, my wife and I have been together for 17 years.
Wow.
And, one of the things, key lessons I think is making sure that what I just described about what we want as artists, like feeling like you effectively communicated a thing that you feel that is complicated. That's like, I think that's a basic human need even for people in relationships. You want to feel like your partner understands this thing that you're feeling and thinking. And that like, even just being able to let that person know that you received that message and it's loud and clear and you understand it, whether or not there's action items or to-dos or corrections, okay, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. Just letting somebody know that like, I understand what you're saying and I've received that message. Gosh, that's such an important piece of keeping a healthy connection with another person, I think.
Have you ever made art for your wife, Natalie, to communicate something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time?
Yeah, I made her a little song once. We sing little songs for each other all the time. We just change lyrics of pop songs and then make up lyrics about how much we love the other person, which is really cheesy. You feel free to throw up if you want.
That's so sweet.
We also like sometimes write text messages to each other that are, I don't know if it's art, but like it's not just prose. Like we're writing text with the purpose of communicating a feeling or saying something to the other person. And then, we've done like little songs here and there and things like that for each other.
I remember you produced a reel talking about the first time you noticed your wife, where you heard her singing, opening for you. And I think you said, you just went up to her and said, I want to hear that voice for the rest of my life.
Which was, maybe a dumb line. But I wasn't trying to do a smart line. I was just telling her what was on my mind. And I did say that to her. It was after I saw her singing for the first time. And yeah, she was playing bass, making these incredible melodies on bass, and then singing different melodies. And a lot of like rock music and pop music and indie music these days, I think is really great. but it's rarely like contrapuntal classical music where there's multiple interwoven melodies that like intersect beautifully and move beautifully with respect to each other. And that was her music. It was like classical music, but in an indie rock like rapper.
Wow.
And I was so mesmerized and so like struck. And so I just went up to her afterwards. I was like, I want to hear your voice every day. So that was what I said. And I guess I get to now, which is nice.
And you two have been together since before the founding of Patreon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we got together in like 2006, I think. So, yeah.
And I remember you've described part of the impetus for Patreon was she was away on tour, you were alone working for months in this video, realized you'd make basically enough money from this video, I don't know, to like buy a single gummy bear or something ridiculous, just this lost in translation between what the audience appreciated about it versus what you were making from it. You've described so much of what drives your art as this desire to be seen and understood. There is a point, I don't know exactly when it was, 2013, 2014, Patreon could have been a side project. It wasn't. It didn't. It became what you've built today, venture-backed. That same connection with people who receive your art, that desire to express yourself, is that something that you also get through Patreon, or was that a different motivation?
I think it's largely the same thing. Now, it does exercise different parts of my brain because I think the feeling of making art and reaching others is similar to the feeling of making Patreon and helping others and creating value for creators and their fans, and I love that. And so there's a lot of similarities. I think the difference is like the behaviors associated with those two things, like what it takes for me to make art versus what it takes for me to make Patreon, which is more operational and tactical and strategic and Zoom meetings and, building systems and recruiting people and, refining strategies and headcount plans and operations and financial plans and investors and, all that stuff, which is the majority of my time, right, is all that stuff now because Patreon is my full-time job, triple-time job. But yeah, it wasn't a side project because it was needed. Right? It was the thing. It would have been foolish to not dive into that, right? It was like when you see something start to work like that and start to impact so many people and start to literally send billions of dollars to people. There's also an element of like responsibility that I feel there because, Patreon's only 10 years old. Like I remember what it's like to be a creator on these platforms and to not know what's going on and to have the company make changes and to not understand or disagree or to feel like everything is on the line and you don't have control of these fucking companies. I remember what that feels like. And now it's like through this crazy weird twist of fate and life path, now I'm in this seat like of CEO.
Dictate, yeah.
And like, I don't want to take that for granted. Like that is, I want to, I feel tremendous weight of that and responsibility for having that luck. Honestly, it's just luck and weirdness that I get to be doing this now. And I want to make sure I do it well and right.
Were there ever periods where you thought to yourself, maybe I shouldn't be CEO or maybe I don't want to be CEO?
There are periods where I feel like my day-to-day is so brutal and hard, I don't want to do this day-to-day. I mean, I think any CEO who doesn't admit to that is probably not telling you the truth.
They're lying. They're full of bullshit.
They're like full of shit.
I have those days too. Yeah.
But there's never been a moment where I was like, I don't think I'm the right person to steward this mission into the world. There's never been one of those moments. Is every day rainbows and puppies and sunshine? No freaking way. Have I ever gotten to the point where I feel ready to pass the baton? No.
Yeah. I like that framing. You're the one to steward it into the world. And I'm asking another question, and I'll tell you why after I ask this. But say someone else came along, Jack Viewpoint 2 version 2, and he's like, hey, actually, I'm going to go build Patreon. Would you step aside and be like, oh, okay, someone else is building it, so I can go focus on my music and art? Or is it like, no, like, it should be me. It needs to be. It will be me.
Here's the funny thing about that, which is I do have this feeling of like, you know, when like obvious products come out, and it's like, oh, that is going to happen. Like, regardless of if this company does it or some other company does it, that's going to happen. I have that feeling about Patreon. Like, Patreon's strategy, this idea of building like communities and media tools and business tools for creators, not to like do the discovery thing, the TikTok thing, the YouTube thing where you're like reaching billions of people, but to like hang with your tight fans, your core group of people, your like 1,000 true fans, and to build community and media and business with that group of people and to have that depth of connection. Like, of course, that's going to be a thing. Honestly, whether Patreon does it or not, that's going to be a thing in the world. And so I think your question is actually a good one, which is like, what if somebody else came along and did it? So far, that hasn't happened.
Right.
And I don't see it happening. I honestly, I don't really know why. But I do have that feeling that like this is a thing that's gotta be and gotta exist, and it's gonna happen over the long run. It's gonna happen whether you know Patreon does it or not. Honestly,
I've asked that question because I've thought a lot about how to reconcile these stories I have of you as an artist, a musician, and as a tech CEO, partially because I've been trying to reconcile these different sides of myself.
Yeah.
In some ways, like I woke up today feeling both so excited I get to do this with you and also like weirdly guilty. Like my team is like working on shipping a product out right now and like asked to schedule a meeting. I got a text today from an engineer and be like, hey, so like we sent our doc over to legal and they came back like 15,000 things that are wrong with it. Like, what do you think of this? And I'm like, I actually need to be in a headspace where I can go in and just catch up with Jack and can't answer this right now. Wow, I'm letting him down. What I'm hearing from you, at least the story informing now, why hasn't someone else tried to do this? Why didn't something like this exist before you did it? The two are inextricably linked. I don't know if anyone would have tried to build something like Patreon when you did, or even now, without this like obsessive focus on how do I bring more art into the world? Because it's really hard. I mean, we just said right now, algorithms are like dominating everything. Like Patreon is very firmly in the side of, no, don't try and get 5 million followers on TikTok. Find the 1,000 people who really care about you. And that's not what people have focused on lately. It's almost counter-cyclical. And so it's almost like you can't just go into this and be like, this is $1 billion business idea. You have to go into it because, I don't know, you have this obsessive, like, I'm going to make this song. It's going to be good. And I'm going to build the thing that lets me fund myself and help other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so curious about your struggle there because obviously I've had a struggle with that. You know, I've found a way to be creative and to have my outlet where I you know, I'm on Instagram talking about, you know, businesses and talking about artistry and talking about music, and I have Pamplemousse and Pockets. And this podcast, it's been so cool to watch this grow.
Thank you.
And to watch this work and impact people and the community that's forming around it that's so awesome to see. How are you balancing it? How are you figuring out how to do your creativity and be an operator at the same time? And actually, I'm asking you that question in earnest because I do not feel like I've figured it out. It feels like constant struggle and rebalancing to me. I mean, I feel like I'm on one of those boards where you're just constantly tweaking and adjusting to make it work.
I think I'm focusing so much on how to reconcile these aspects of you because they do feel like they're pulling me apart in a lot of ways. And for me, that deep desire you feel to be seen and understood, I have that as well. And I feel for 99% of my life, Jack, I never got to express that at all because I was so focused on, I need to go and make my parents proud and find that job. And I had all this pent up energy that I think the past 4 or 5 years of my life have been, no, like this needs to come out. And I don't know how to create. I don't know how to make things, but it manifests as, well, let me help the people that can. Like this entire class of creators and musicians and influencers and YouTubers, you know, I'm not good at that stuff, but I know like the money side, the tech and finance side. Let me go help them that way. And in serving them, I spent so much time around them that it gradually became, why am I so scared? Because they're not superhuman either.
100%. I mean, yeah, my favorite creators, like when I feel the most inspired when I'm watching a creator, it doesn't matter if it's a musician or a YouTuber or whoever, it's when I see somebody who is, and it sounds cheesy to say, but it's like somebody who is truly who they are. And they're fine just being that. When I think about Prince, like Bowie, Natalie Lynn, Elle Mills, right? Like these are people who are just like, here I am. This is me. I don't know what it is. I'm so inspired by that because like maybe there's like, maybe deep down inside, all of us are like scared that if we show that to people, we'll be rejected. People won't think it's good, or that they'll think we're bad or guilty or weird or whatever it is. And there's something like freeing aspirationally. I still don't feel like I've accomplished that, by the way, as an artist. I don't feel like I have ever been like, here's who I am. It's like really hard to do that. And so maybe that's the other thing about it is like when I see Elle doing that or Natalie doing that or Lewis Cole doing that or Jack Stratton doing that, it's inspiring to me. It's encouraging to me. It makes me want to do it more.
That concept on vulnerability, that there are artists who can just put themselves out there and not knowing how it will be received. Do you believe in the concept of unconditional love?
Wow, what a question.
Yeah.
I don't have a hot take on that. Let me see if I can think of one on my feed here.
I mean, I ask because I think for me, what inspired me seeing people do this is because deep down, I'm afraid I'll never be good enough. That love is always conditional. Oof. So there's this deep fear, both that stopped me from creating and sharing, that eventually prompted me to do so in the earnest yearning to, hey, this is me. Do you love me now? And I think that's why I work with creators. That's why I do what I do now. I do think there's still that part of me that I'm like, no, it'll never feel unconditionally. So I'm always striving to put it out there and help others do the same.
Where does that come from for you? Like, can you point to a moment in your life or like a time in your life where that originated?
You mentioned before that it's all about watch time on YouTube, where your initial impulse to create can be distorted by the incentives of the system you're in. I think for me, all these yearnings I had when I was young quickly became subsumed in salary and prestige. Like that is what brings worth to a person.
Yes.
And I think, the past few years of my life have why I care so much about helping this creative renaissance occur in its own ways. I hate that world. I think the world defaults to one where everyone is judged based on these external measurable metrics of success. Not only art, but our businesses too. How much have you raised? How much are you valued? What are your business KPIs? Because it's impossible for people to take the time to know what to do with something without having those easily trackable metrics. But the flip side of that is you focus on those and it becomes really, really conditional. And so I think for me, so much of it has been, I've spent so much time optimizing on this. Let's go, we've been doing this now for 4.5 years. Let's go do something. I have no idea if this is going to work, but I sure hope it does. And the creative part has come in because I don't think I could do this job if I didn't get to do this part as well.
I learned a couple years into Patreon that creativity was my pilot light. In other words, if I'm not doing creativity, my pilot light burns out and then I'm empty. And so I've found a way to continue that creativity as I've, been building Patreon. And in many ways, that's what keeps me going, right? Yeah. So I get to sort of enjoy the process and the joy of making something and the long-term joy associated with building something like Patreon. But, this concept of like salary and prestige and that being tied to unconditional love, it made me think that like, gosh, we kind of all have our own version of watch time. Each of us has a definition of success that we think we want, that we've been trained to want for some reason, but it's not actually what fills our souls. It's not actually what ignites our spirit. I think part of the journey for us and the difficulty of the Homo sapien 200,000 years into our existence is self-reflection to understand, what do I actually want? Not what does everyone want me to want, and what am I being trained to want, and what are the positive and negative reinforcement mechanisms in place that solidify me in that direction? How do I break out of that and instead figure out what lights me up? And that's easier said than done. But it's funny how that for me has kind of been a North Star aspirational question that keeps surfacing over and over again. The more I do things like Patreon, building a company and all this, the more I realize like there isn't an answer. There's no Yoda. There's no playbook. There's no person who has the knowledge. There's no system. There's no book you can read. There's no research you can do. It comes down to, what do you want? The number of times I've had to learn that freaking lesson makes me frustrated that like I can't just seem to really hang on to that. But boy, you know, I'm about to turn 40 next year. And like, you know, if I had to like talk about one of the deep truths in my life that has started to really resonate, it's the importance of really figuring out what do I want?
What do you think you need to, you said you don't feel the same ability to stand in front of the audience and say, this is who I am. Is that something you think or want to ever get to?
I see a therapist. And I talk with my therapist about this. Literally, like, I want to be more okay with saying who I am. And I think Charlie Kaufman wrote a really wonderful piece about this. It was a speech that he gave to a conference where he literally says, like, say who you are. Really say it. Tell someone 500 years from now, someone not born yet, the things about yourself that you're afraid to say. Say that in your screenplay. Say who you are. That for me is my North Star. And you know, I think there's a couple schools of thought there. The one would be, you're not obligated to share that much about yourself on the internet. In fact, there's a lot of downsides sharing that much about yourself, being that vulnerable. You don't owe people that at all. And I understand that philosophy. And I don't think that's wrong. I think there are a lot of downsides to that. And at the same time, my favorite artists have at some point in their lives really done that well. And so, yeah, I at some point, I want to really get there. Yeah. I hope I make something in my life at some point that really tells people who I am.
From a conventional perspective, there's nobody out there who wouldn't think that already. And if I might ask, what are you afraid of?
This is, I think, one of the challenges of the modern internet landscape. Yeah. It's really not easy to say who you are because everything gets quoted and clicked and taken out of context and posted and reposted. Yeah. And again, I realize it's trite to say that there's not a lot of room for nuance on the internet, but gosh, the internet is just pushing us in this very polarizing way where there are these factions developing and sides developing. And it's really, I've found it very frustrating. I mean, actually, it's black, hat, white all over again, right? But that's happening to humanity right now. And so, like, what's an example of that? I mean, I think a good example of that, honestly, is like how I feel about AI, which is like really uncomfortable for me to talk about. And even talking about it now, I like have fear and I'm imagining the comments under this YouTube video. And it's like, CEO of Patreon says this about an AI. And like, you know, what I actually feel about AI is really complicated. I have a lot of fear about it. I have a feeling of awe about it. I have a insane curiosity that I have to explore and use it and understand it. The feeling I got about it when I opened up Midjourney for the first time was the same feeling. The last time I got that feeling, I was 12 years old and I got my first video camera. That's how I felt when I opened up Midjourney. Wow. I felt like this is the most important communication and artistic tool of the last few decades. To say that even is a scary thing. Yeah. And yet here we are entering this phase of humanity where this is now an option to us. And there's all kinds of trade-offs and downsides associated with it. There's job displacement. There's the different type of work that you do under AI. It's like for many people more fulfilling to use a pen and paper and draw the thing and write the thing. There's the payment problem. There's the training data problem. But like all of those components of it that are problems, I am deeply worried about those things. And that is true. And it is also true that I'm insanely excited about this new technology. And I think it's really important and really interesting. And I want to play with it and learn about it. So that would be an example of like, I don't know that I've ever really said that on the internet before. And I worry about saying things like that because the conversation about these things has just become so polarized. There's the pro AI, step on the gas and accelerate as fast as possible. And there's the anti-AI, all AI is evil and let's, get rid of it. And it's so hard to like say the non-black hat white version of it,
And you're not just Jack anymore. You are CEO of Patreon. Do you see Patreon more as an extension of Jack, or is Jack in service to Patreon?
I view it, oh, wow. I was going to be very quick to jump into the second version of that. And it's probably not quite the second version, but I do see myself as a steward of Patreon. I see myself as like, it's not obviously there's no democratic tools, but it's like a rep, I'm trying to rep creators as much as I can. And so, I do. It does feel like that. And I'm a human, I'm a person. And like, if I forget about that, it won't work. Because I will stop making things and and then I'll feel
that the pilot light goes out.
The pilot light goes out. Yeah, I'll lose the plot. I really think it is important for me to keep making things and publishing them on the internet. If for no other reason, then I understand what it feels like right now to do that.
What prompted the reimagining of Patreon, both from a logo and brand perspective? And Patreon isn't just about here's how you make money. It's also now about community. It's also about opening shops. There's been new directions. And I think there's a story in my head where is this coming from what Jack's experienced as a creator and what he's experienced talking with them? Or is this something that's coming more for the Patreon side from a business perspective? Hey, this is important.
We would never do something unless both pieces were there, right? Like, so from the personal standpoint, I remember when Natalie, my wife, started getting frustrated is the wrong word. We were coming out with music video after music video after music video. And it felt Pamplemousse's metrics were crushing, 6 million views a month, up and to the right, making a lot of money. We had a team of 5. We were still profitable, even with a team of 5. Like Pamplemousse is like a good business.
Yeah.
And she felt empty, totally empty 5 years in. And felt that way for a long time. And we had a lot of conversations about it. And if you want to know what she felt like, just watch Tom Scott's video. Like watch Matt Pat's video. Like that's what she felt like. And we had a lot of conversations about that. And then she went on tour for her solo work. She came out with her own record. She played a 200-person room, 250-person room. And it's hard to describe the feeling of relief and release and joy playing for these people that she had. It like brought her to tears. I think there's something happening on the internet right now where we've lost the plot. It doesn't feel good anymore. And I think part of that is because of this thing that I've described that's happening to the internet holistically, where we're losing touch with our communities. The internet is reorganizing around algorithms instead of around people. That's not good for creators. I think that's a bad version of the internet. I don't want to participate in that version of the internet. I don't want to build that version of the internet. I want the internet where you can have 1,000 true fans and build a strong community with them and have that community get stronger over time instead of weaker and pulled apart over time. That's what I want. That's what I want as a creator. I think that's also a great business, right? Yeah. Like I think that's a good business for Patreon because it's different than what everybody else is doing right now. The whole internet shifted to shorts, right? Instagram started building Reels. TikTok came out. YouTube started building shorts. Twitter built a For You feed. Everybody's going like this, and Patreon's going like this. And we're going like this because it's differentiated and it's needed and it sets us apart from everybody else. And so from a strategic and business perspective, it makes a lot of sense for Patreon to do that. I think it's a whole. I think it's something that creators need that no one else is building. I still am confused why other people aren't building that. I know why those companies aren't building it. They're not building it because their customers are advertisers and they need mass eyeballs, mass engagement, watch time. That's literally 99% of their revenue, right? So they can't build this. Another reason that it's a good business for us, because it's like it's defensive for us. It's like it's a strategic move for us. So I guess the answer to your question is like it is both. I think it's a really needed thing for creators in this modern phase of the internet as the world is hyper shifting toward watch time and short form and algorithmic curation. And I think it's a good way for Patreon to differentiate and serve the creative class in a way that I hope creates more depth versus, breadth, which we have plenty of at this point.
I love that. Jack, we're just about at time. I want to say thank you so much.
Of course.
For chatting with me today.
Thank you for the thoughtful questions. And yeah, every time I freaking talk to you, it's just so great. So thanks.
I love chatting with you.